keynotes we've ever done. Like this group is the all-star of marketing and account-based selling and ABM. Like this super excited for this conversation. And truly we have the who's who of marketing leadership and marketing, I would argue entrepreneurship. So let me do some basic intros today. But before we do that, we have upwards of 3,000 to 4,000 attendees on this at the event today. And truly all the way from some of the largest companies in the world to even very small startups. So like this is a very diverse group, and we have people from all over the world who are signing in right now live. So very excited to have everybody involved. So I'll jump into some of the intros here. We'll start with Gabe. Gabe, thank you again so much for being on the at the event today. Gabe has been with Demandbase for a long time. Gabe is arguably one of the most interesting men alive. He is I think you're a comparative lit and Russian
language and literature major. Yeah.
Dude, I love it.
The usual.
It's my love language. I'm a philosophy undergrad, so a little humanities to keep this conversation diverse, I suppose. Look, you've been with Demandbase since 2012, right?
Yeah, it's been an incredible ride, kind of
unbelievable.
From the kind of the beginning of ABM and to see all the change and evolution and advances. And I love the company. We have a great culture, so it's been a great ride. I'm really thankful for.
And truly, you've been instrumental in this growth. I mean, you guys are really raised over 300 million, almost 350 million through debt and equity. You guys, again, the OGs of this industry of ABM, and truly have kind of helped found modern marketing approach that there's a lot of like targeting and personalization versus the old spray and pray approach. So super excited. I mean, how many employees you guys are about?
Yeah, we're about up to 750 employees. We're global. We have a presence in Europe and in India. Yeah.
And truly, I think, as the markets open up, potentially one of the next big hot public companies, though, we got to get through this craziness that we're in. So I'm really excited to have you on and truly one of the luminaries in the industry.
Well, thank you so much. You being very kind, and I'm excited. I'm incredibly excited to talk to Kris and Godard and yourself. And thanks for having me.
Yeah, super excited. All right, Kris, you're next. So you guys literally invented this whole concept and of creating ABM in a way that no one ever did it. I mean, similarly, you guys have raised over 150 mil. You guys, I think over 250 employees. You are, a business grad, so like we'll forgive you on that one. I mean, there's got to have some diversity. Just kidding. But honestly, you guys started. When did you start the company?
2017.
And really, as you did this whole concept of doing high impact mailers and doing this in context to high personalization and high targeting on the account side, really, I think revolutionized the industry. It's pretty amazing. Some of the amazing metrics. You guys have done over 5 million deliveries, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's the best one that you guys like? What's the one that you're in the ivory tower and you're like, this one is the money play. It works every time. What is it?
Well, the actually unique thing about what we do is it's not a one size fits all, and the personalization effect of knowing who you're going to send to what's the right time is actually the best. So what works for Gabe might not work for Dave. But in general, there's some themes around, the Yeti mugs, the Stanleys, socks, cookies do really well, Amazon gift cards. But again, it's all about the personalization.
That's a good answer. It was a bad question, but you helped me not look so dumb. But truly, it's a whole nother perspective of the personalization approach that we have on the roundtable here. So thank you so much for being involved.
Thank you.
Cool. And last but not least, Godard, you have invented a whole new type of research, right? I mean, basically disrupting the traditional approach that, has been around forever and was largely ineffective, creating this whole new genre, again, of research and really it's led into a whole new type of intent. And what's super interesting, again, some of the interesting kind of vanity metrics, over 8 million software buyers are involved in your ecosystem. And what's cool is just recently you were recognized as one of the top 150 most influential websites in the AI space. So if you think about what's happening with like GPT today, like they're learning from the content and the research that you're providing to the world. So like it's actually, you're raising the overall level of what's happening in AI, which is kind of amazing and frankly pretty exciting. What's from your point of view, like, and again, I'm just trying to understand a little bit of background. Like, and by the way, for people to know, Godard also is a serial entrepreneur, wildly successful, built a company several, more than once, but like the one that I'm very familiar with was Big Machines, sold that, and then started this, and really helped build the industry around what he's doing. So again, couldn't be more excited and more thrilled. What's from the G2 side, if you were to be like, hey, this is our secret sauce, what would you say it is?
I would say it's consumerizing B2B software buying. And I know, Dave, you're also a longtime software entrepreneur, InsideSales. I think I always thought it was just way too hard to sell and buy software. And one of the friction points to me was Gartner and analysts like them, right? Because it took years for them to catch up, and they write a book, kind of every 2 years. And when we started the company, I thought, wow, that's like Encyclopedia Britannica. I don't even know if some of our listeners remember that, but when I was going in school, right, these beautiful books, and then Wikipedia came along, and we just thought the software industry deserved something more real time. And like in consumer purchasing on Amazon, we all rely on peer reviews, and we just thought that our industry would be better if we had real-time peer insights that would help software buyers buy faster and also help software sellers more easily connect to the right buyer.
Well, the other thing I love about the platform is it also gives the ability, and you talk about this time problem. Traditional research, software research and corporate research firms, you've got this dating period and it costs you a lot, $50K, $100K, $200-300K a year, and this dating period of 2 or 3 years before they really start to cover you. And then even when they do, they're filtering all of the content through their lens, where what you've done is you basically said, look, we're going to speed this thing up. This can happen in real time. And we're not going to filter. We're going to put content out there that's unabashed. We're going to it's good, it's bad, but it does give like real access. I mean, it feels just like a modern exchange of ideas. And so it was one of the spaces that was clearly severely in need of some disruption. And obvious because again, 8 million software buyers and in the small time frame you've been able to build what you've done is pretty stunning. So thank you for being on. All right, let's jump in. This again, super excited about the topic today, very timely. So just to put some framework around, some context around what we're going to talk about. We really want to talk about the ideas of modern marketing post-COVID. I say post, but let's call it post-COVID environment. We're also, in the middle of maybe toward the end of a banking crisis, and we're also in the middle of an economic downturn. Maybe again, I don't want to get political on this, but we're clearly in the middle of an economic downturn, and it's a very difficult, very challenging environment, and we've got thousands of sales and marketing leaders, executives, and probably individuals trying to figure out how to be effective and trying to figure out what's the right way to be successful in their roles, in their jobs, in their companies, and also represent their companies in a reasonable, effective way. So that's the context for today's conversation. And so I want to start off with Gabe. So the first thing, look, we would be remiss if we don't start with AI. It's such a crazy hot topic. In November of last year, OpenAI introduced GPT 3.5, and it's disrupted jobs. It's created, in fact, one of my favorite things is there's a new role in companies called a prompt engineer, where rather than being a content writer, I become expert at asking GPT to write content for me, and then I can edit that content, make it effective. But just overall, I would love kind of your high level take of how is AI, and in particular probably GPT, in the B2B environment, not the B2C environment, meaning like as we're engaging in marketing to other businesses, What's your take? Like, what are you seeing? What's good? What's bad?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a huge topic that can't be overstated. I mean, I think that's where it all starts. And, you know, in my mind, you know, having been, you know, in the workforce for 25 years, I feel like it has the potential to be the most disruptive technology of any we've lived through, you know, maybe save the internet. And, you know, broadly, you know, I think in a lot of ways it's going to follow that cycle. So I do think, you know, the excitement about AI, the investment that goes into AI will be a part of what, you know, takes us out of the recessionary conditions you mentioned. I think there's going to be the typical kind of buzz or like, you know, winners and misses cycle, and it'll probably, not to be cynical, yeah, the hype cycle, it'll probably create the next bubble. And I think, you know, as entrepreneurs, as sales and marketers, leaders, I think it's incumbent on everybody to invest, you know, in their business and in themselves to make sure, you know, they're getting the actual benefit out of the AI versus the buzz.
Interesting.
And I think that's going to be absolutely key. And I think we're in the early innings of deciphering, you know, what is real, which there's a lot of meat on the bone, and what's not, and in fact is, you know, is probably going to lead to some bad businesses.
That makes sense. Godard, what, like, how do you decipher the difference between the good and bad? And in context of this conversation, like, how do you personalize when, by definition, a lot of this is just taking averages of what's happening out on the web and in conversations? So how do you think about the value of good versus bad AI, and again, in context, how do you create personalization with it?
Yeah, and actually at G2, we kind of, in some ways, straddle B2C and B2B. You know, like I said at the beginning, we're trying to consumerize B2B software buying. And so we're actually innovating, trying to learn, but we've launched a G2 Monty, which is our AI software buying assistant for software. And we're partnering with OpenAI, so we're building it on top of ChatGPT. And then in terms of trust, we're trying to figure out is create a trusted flavor of ChatGPT, essentially, where we inject the G2 data, the reviews, and trust is also very core to G2.com. And we do have over 2 million reviews, but we reject about a third of the reviews that are submitted. And we use both AI to try to screen and score the reviews, but then we also, you know, because people will try to, let's say, review a competitive product or their own product. So we try to catch all the fraud and all the bad quality reviews. And so it's very key that our data set is trusted. But now with AI, it's also an opportunity. If we can layer in and inject our trusted data into the AI engine, then our AI Monty can make better recommendations. And our goal is that AI Monty kind of takes all the generalized knowledge that OpenAI has already built in from the internet, if you will, and then add our own unique trusted domain data so it can make really trusted recommendations. But I'd say it's still early. And I think one of the things about ChatGPT, I think it's also confusing. At least on Google, when you do a search, right, you can see which website is it, and you can kind of make your own determination. Is this a trusted brand? Can you trust this site? And one of the challenges with OpenAI, you have no idea what the source data is, which frankly also scares me, because even if you go to OpenAI, some of that data is trained, or if you go to Bard by Google, some of that data is trained by G2. And I mentioned at the beginning, Washington Post did analysis. I think G2 is the number 151 most influential data set.
That's amazing.
The Google data set, but also there's no attribution. You know, so it's also, as a content company, also a bit scary, challenging. And it does remind me of like the early days of Google search. I think at the beginning, Google also said, we're not going to enforce copyright. We're not going to enforce infringement. And obviously they had to quickly go away from that. And I think in AI, it's totally new. But I think one of the things that does scare me, there's no attribution, right? You have no idea how OpenAI came up with a seemingly great answer. And our CTO, Mike Wheeler, my co-founder, he was just at visiting OpenAI in San Francisco. And he also said there's this false confidence. And I like to say OpenAI, ChatGPT sounds like an entrepreneur. Like sometimes we have to have false confidence with investors, right? At the beginning, we're kind of making it up. But it's a little bit scary because ChatGPT always sounds confident. And sometimes it's hallucinating. And how do you know?
In fact, that hallucination, I was using it, studying with my daughter, and using it to help do research around a paper. And the content was wrong. But it was so confident that it was right. I was like, wait, am I wrong? And no, I actually went over to Google, and it turns out GPT was wrong. So that hallucination, it's an interesting it's a weird and interesting scenario. So what I mean, it's amazing how quickly you guys have been able to adapt and integrate. Well, let me say this on two fronts. And I'm sure all three of your organizations, you know, we talked about AI was introduced last November. AI has been around for years and years. And I would suspect you've integrated, I mean, look, Gabe, I know for a fact, like you guys have been using this and these technologies, the machine learning technologies for years. It's these large, you know, language models that have kind of disrupted the way we think. But it's amazing, Godard, how quickly you guys have been able to integrate this into the platform. Are you seeing like a value? Are users giving feedback that they're seeing value from this? I mean, again, it's early days, but I'd be curious like what the feedback is.
Yeah, we do have hundreds of people signing up to it every day. You can check it out on g2.com, and we do get feedback, and we actually say put the feedback into Monty, and then we do our own AI analysis of the feedback. And generally, I think just like with ChatGPT, people love the interface. You know what I mean? Because like you're talking to a human. I like to say G2 Monty is like the best Accenture consultant in an AI box, but you can ask good questions. And I think the other cool thing about AI, you can start with requirements, because, you know, we do categorize all software on G2, but a lot of people don't know what they're looking for. Like one of our categories is account-based analytics. In the enterprise world, like Demandbase happens to be #1 on G2. A lot of marketers might not know they're looking for account-based analytics. You know what I mean? They probably have some business problem, like they're trying to make their marketing more efficient or better target their ICP. And the beauty with Monty, you don't have to look for account-based analytics. You can just put in your problem, your marketing challenge in real world words, and then it can start to recommend technologies and approaches that could help. So I think the conversational intelligence is far superior. And so I think everybody loves that. And I think a challenge though is the attribution. There's also vendors ask us, well, why did Monty recommend this tool, not this tool? And the honest answer with AI, you don't really 100% know, right? It's kind of a black box.
Right.
And that's I think the thing we're also trying to figure out.
Trying to put some boundaries. Kris, like, again, you know, Godard, you mentioned, you know, Demandbase is #1 in the category on G2. So is Sendoso. So like you've got the who's who of platforms here.
So in account-based direct mail, for example. And but I think that's also where AI can help, because a lot of people don't know looking for that, right? They're probably more like, hey, I want to send better gifts to my customers.
Right. It does kind of bridge the gap of understanding. I mean, so many opportunities. Kris, what are you seeing in terms of demand from your customers, or as you guys, your marketing team is using this, like, and how are you thinking about integrating this into your technology, your platform?
Yeah. So as you alluded to, some of it's been in the works for years, or some of it's already been rolled out, and some of it, you know, the hype train is here. So, you know, you got to talk it up now than, you know, sooner than later. But I think some of the big takeaways for me in AI come around, you know, copywriting and the ability to use these language learning models for better copywriting. For us, that could be a gift note or a e-gift note. So some of the content that you want to include with your gift or your mailer can be generated by AI. I think with that too, there's a recommendation engine behind the scene on what's the right thing to send based on other things. So those are some of the obvious ones. I think the UI changes on how people are going to interact with sites is something we're taking into account on, you know, this prompt box versus clicking buttons or drop downs. And so I think that's something that we'll start to see some big changes on. But to that point, though, I think there was a good perspective on the good and the bad on, you know, if you rely on, you know, AI to do all of your copywriting, you know, where is the, you know, can it do the personalization? Can it be that thought leader? Will it make that perfect sentence for you? So I think there's I think we're in the early days of testing and kind of A/B testing the performance of humans versus AI in terms of writing content, which I think is interesting.
What do you think about the fear that, you know, it's taking jobs away? Look, it's a hot topic in you know, on the web and in markets. Is that a thing? And what are you saying?
I think there's certain jobs that will be taken away, but I think there'll be many more that will be added and they'll be supplemented. So people will maybe shift what they were doing before or doing different things in their job than they were doing before. So I think, you know, the model that a lot of B2B, you know, SaaS companies adopted from, you know, a decade ago, kind of the I don't know, you call it like the Salesforce playbook of, that predictable revenue model, I think has been in the works for a decade or more. And I think AI has a chance to disrupt some of those jobs, or at least supplement them so that you're doing different things, that you're prioritizing, different areas of work than some of the maybe more mundane automated tasks that now AI can do for you.
One of the interesting things, I was in a debate with my son he's smarter than me. So sounds strange, but when you meet him, you're like, yeah, he's smarter than Dave. One of the interesting conversations is AI has disrupted the more analytical approach and analysis. Like that's been around for quite a while. And again, you guys all use this. What's transitioned is it's now disrupted the creative side. So the writing, some of the art and the music. What do you guys, I'd love a little bit of feedback of what should not be done right now with AI? Like what should people not be doing that might be happening? And maybe start with Gabe here.
Well, I mean, I think where its limitations are, right, and where its dangers are is where you want to avoid the use cases. And I think, I mean, you hit on something big there on the analytical side, which is kind of a little bit what I was getting at before. Is there's AI beyond generative AI, right? And I think a little bit what's being lost right now is how much is there in terms of building models that make decisions that are going to have a tremendous impact on technology. And I think a lot of, my take would be a lot of the buzz is going into the generative AI right now. And I think there's going to be a lot of kind of me too use cases there. And so I think you got to be careful, from a business perspective on where you're strategic, where you're solving business problems. I mean, that's what entrepreneurs, that's what we're doing as sales and marketing leaders, is we're looking to utilize anything that we have to solve business problems, right? And AI can be a part of that. So one thing we don't want to do is just kind of do what everybody else is doing. I think another thing is, it's kind of a self kind of to the hallucinations and the almost the self-fulfilling prophecy of this is what's currently working. And we see a lot of scary instances of this, of course, and kind of the way it has made some decisions regarding different population pools and in terms of targeting. But within marketing, if you're continue to do what you have been doing and amplify what you have been doing, as opposed to being disruptive, which is the heart of an entrepreneurship, you kind of risk losing the lifeblood of your long-term business, right? So I think balancing, what I'm getting at is that you kind of have to balance the tactics of AI with a sound business strategy that still relies on entrepreneurship, or else you kind of risk becoming, undifferentiated.
Yeah. Again, almost definitionally, AI finds kind of the optimal average. And your point is, if you just rely on AI to run your strategy, you're going to be really average. It's interesting. Yeah. Kris, do you agree? Do you disagree? Like what, let's get this.
I definitely agree on the whole, it's buzzy. And if you're the new, I don't know, a decade ago, it was what's the next Uber for X? Everyone was creating the new Uber for X. And now it's let's create the next, AI for X. And I think that's risky, because if you're not solving big problems, or you're not passionate enough that you're going to spend decades trying to stay to this one problem that you're trying to solve, it's going to create a bunch of companies that pop up and potentially go out of business. So I think that I agree with Gabe. I think there's other things that's just uncharted territory. I think, I hit on the content piece earlier, that copywriting is an obvious, creative, nuance that's being disrupted. But people write content for thought leadership. And, can you, as the chat GPT, be able to create that same thought leadership that, the CEO or the C-level VP in that category can create? Or, is content created for SEO purposes, and is, in 6 months, a year, is Google and Bing going to get smart enough to be shame on you, that was created through chat GPT, we figured you out, we're going to ding you. And so now there's this huge, hey, I have hundreds of blog posts that I just spun up overnight, and now you're going to be in trouble. So I think there's just a lot of uncharted territory, and people are going to be making guesses, putting bets, and I think it'll be, years before we figure out the true benefits or the true risks that happen.
That's fascinating, because again, I've read a couple of articles. I'm just like, this is not a person. Like, it's not interesting. And if it is a person, shame on this person. Like, it's just not that good. Godard, like, how about you? Like, again, do you agree kind of with the sentiment here? What's the current bad of AI in general, and what's the bad of like AI in particular on kind of these large language models? Like, what are you seeing not going well? Like fake reviews, is that kind of stuff emerging?
For sure. It'll certainly be just another way to write fake reviews. And I think that's an example of the bad. But I would say the good, and what I tell our team, to me, it's the ultimate human assistant. And I think also in any company, not just software, not just B2B, right? I do think, and my CTO co-founder, Mike Wheeler, he's the one doing the OpenAI partnership, but he also said for himself, like this co-pilot, now every software engineer can use right in GitHub. And, but every really good coder I talk to, they're like, wow, this is amazing. So I think your 10x engineers can become 100x engineers, but it's still just a human assistant. And I think that's great. And I think it's the same thing with a writer. And actually, what I also told our teams, like one of my CSMs, one of our best CSMs at G2, he's kind of worried. He's like, hey, is this going to replace me as a CSM? I'm like, I don't think it's going to replace you. This is one of our best CSMs. I'm like, you're going to become a 100x CSM. Yeah. I honestly worry more. And it's a new tool. I do think we all have to learn it. So I'm actually using it myself. Like it's one of my favorites on my browser, the ChatGPT, and I'm paying it $20 a month. So I get 4. But even do my own work as a CEO. So I kind of feel like any knowledge worker now, it's kind of like when Google came out. If you didn't learn how to become good at Google searches, like that would hurt you in any job. And I probably don't believe that prompt engineer is going to be a separate job. I actually think that's kind of honestly dumb, because I think for every job, whether you're a writer, an engineer, or a CEO, it's an assistant. And it's like any new powerful tool, you have to learn how to use it. And if you learn how to use it, I think you can become 10x better at your job. If you don't learn how to use it, you're probably going to become obsolete. So I do think it's potentially that powerful, and it's upon us to use it. But I think we can't trust it blindly. And the idea, if you just push the ChatGPT code or just the ChatGPT blog, it's not going to be good. It's not going to have any personalization, and it's going to be kind of useless, right? It's just going to be spam content. And so I do think we have to add the human element, the human design, and the overall human direction. But then it's a great assistant for all of us.
That makes sense. And just I want to highlight a couple of things I heard from the group here. One, everyone needs to be a prompt engineer. Like if you want to be relevant today, like you better know how to use these tools. And really, this should be assisting everything we do. An interesting story is, so I sit on the board of a university here in Utah, and they took an approach, it was fascinating, where they actually said, we expect every student to be using this and leveraging GPT in their writing, in their papers, in their research, versus trying to say, hey, you can't use this, instead of blocking it. They actually have the professors learning how to use it, and they don't actually discourage people to not use it. They're saying, look, students, this is a new tool, it's a new reality. You better figure out how to use it, yet still create value and content on top of it, versus trying to just run away from it. So I want to move away from the AI conversation, but I'm sure it'll integrate back in. But I really want to talk about personalization, about ABM, about really what I would argue is modern marketing. But before we do it, does anyone have one last, I've been thinking about this. There's one last thing I want to say about AI and GPT.
The last thing I would say is I think there's an opportunity for sales or revenue enablement teams to really think about how do they enable everyone. Right now, it feels like a Wild West, but can you centralize training around how best to, create prompts or how do you make sure you have some level playing field so that if you're looking at data, you don't just assume this rep's so much better. Are they using AI? Are they not? Are they, is everyone on the same playing field? Because I think you want to make sure it's not a Wild West for sales reps and CSM. So I think there's a big opportunity for enablement here for go-to-market teams.
That's an interesting. Go ahead.
Sorry, Dave. What Kris said reminds me of one really tactical idea. My favorite ChatGPT prompt is is like say it with 50% less words and make it punchier.
That's it. So true. Like how many times does it just go on and on? You're like, oh.
And especially I get like outreach requests from our BDR team, you know, because they'll see like, I know Kris, hey, can you email them? And then they always send me a draft. And I try to tell them, but I take it to ChatGPT. My system does it now. Say it with 50% less words, make it punchier. And that's just like one thing it's great at, for example. But I think I like the idea, Kris, put that enablement, right? Because certain things it does really well.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to add, I mean, I think I would distill it down, you know, it's a strategy, not a tactic, you know, and I think that's internal and external, meaning in your product, it's got to be a long-term strategy versus a feature that you're adding. And in your you know, for your internal efficiency in your workforce, to Kris's point on enablement and Goddard's on everybody should be using it, you got to have a cohesive approach to leveraging it within your company so you're differentiated.
And again, I love this concept of differentiated, which is kind of like, don't just do what you're seeing everybody else do and say it. So I actually really love this concept. I mean, that kind of gets to where I think the next topic ought to be, which is how do we be better marketers in this, like, again, environment, very unique environment we're in. And I think the answer is personalization. So let's start maybe with you, Gabe. What is the next generation of marketing? Like, what do people need to be doing that they're probably not doing right now?
I mean, number one is align as closely with sales as possible. I mean, that's still what we see as kind of, I mean, you're right about personalization, of course. But I would say that, you know, again, if we're taking this in the context of B2B, you know, our lens, my lens, having been at Demandbase, you know, the last 11 years and seeing the development of ABM as a category, is that the go-to-market is more disrupted than it ever has been within B2B, because it's so quickly changed to be anonymous and digital. And solving that problem of anonymous and digital go-to-market is just, for B2B, is just so much more difficult than B2C, because you got to envision like what a B2B sales cycle is. You know, it's not one person like when you're selling boots, right? It's probably now with all these functional areas and oversight, 50 people. It's not a day. It could be a year. You know, it's not $100. It could be $100,000 or $1 million. And the level of a complexity within that sales cycle to manage digitally in an effective way. You know, I think, you know, even with the advances that Demandbase has made and others and everybody here has made, we are early innings on the technologies that are necessary to manage the complexity of that, a growing complexity of that process. And I think it has to start with, of course, investing in the technology, but it also has to continue with sales and marketing doing that in conjunction, because I tend to find that, you know, the main riff on not being able to effectively navigate the modern customer journey is because even though conceptually sales and marketing want to work very closely together, in the actual operations, in the actual technology, in the actual data, in the workflow, in the measurement, it's highly fragmented.
So how do we, and maybe Kris, I'd love your kind of response on that. Pardon me, like how, this is not a new problem, right? This rift between sales and marketing, but theoretically, the technology should help us bridge that gap, or am I missing something? Like how do and maybe Gabe will come back to you and Godard, I actually would really love I'll hit all of you guys on this, but Kris, like how do we solve that problem? Because it's so like right now, if you don't drive efficiency and productivity, you're probably out of job and you're probably not effective. So how do we solve that right now?
Yeah, one of the things that I see to solve for this is really on the onus of the vendor, the tech stack provider, to make sure that they're building a software platform that can work closely with both sales and marketing. And I think that we're seeing, maybe a decade ago is like, hey, this is MarTech. And, you feel like, oh, this is only going to be used by marketing. But increasingly, our tech stack now has thoughtful use cases where sales can use it and marketing can use it together, whether that's through orchestration or whether that's for us, it's marketing setting up maybe a campaign and sales actually going out and sending the items out. And so I think we're seeing more savvy, software development that really thinks through the jobs to be done and the use cases on bringing sales and marketing together versus maybe having separated platforms in the past. And
I'll pile on. You say sales marketing. I already know you also mean customer success.
Yes,
because a buying cycle is not. I mean, people thought about them in these silos historically, and it's not. Like a customer is a customer whether they haven't bought from you yet or they're renewing. So like I really love this concept of like we need platforms and technologies that look at it holistically, not in silos. Godard, what do you think is the solution to drive this, these gaps between these different departments, and how severe is it right now, kind of with where we're at in the economy?
Yeah, and I do think there's more pressure, and we were talking about it earlier, because right now I think it's almost impossible for most companies to rate venture, unless you're in AI, and then you're probably too early stage to even be worried about your sales and marketing stack. But I think those of us, I think we all have tremendous pressure to get more efficient from our boards. I know we do, right? Our investors, I think every investor is now saying, hey, you got to do more with less. And I do think now marketing has to really not just produce pipeline, right, but produce revenue. And so you have to bridge that gap between the sales bookings and the marketing pipeline metrics. And marketing really has to prove, no, my leads are actually driving revenue. And I do think one interesting trend also is, I think there was this book written by Sangram, another pioneer, called Move. He's also co-founder of Terminus, helped start ABM, right alongside Demandbase. And but also talks about bringing rev ops and marketing ops together. Because I think if you have one scorecard, if everyone has the same set of metrics, which has also been a problem, because let's say marketing was working in, Demandbase, Marketo, sales was in Salesforce, right? But their metrics weren't tied. And a lot of companies still have that problem. I know we still have some of those problems. So I think we're actually contemplating, hey, do we bring our sales and marketing ops teams together and have one ops team, one scorecard, one set of measures? Because I think if you have common measures you're looking at, and marketing can see how their campaigns are flowing into revenue or not. And I think that could be an unlock. And I think systems like Demandbase and Sendoso, I think we're all working to integrate tech stacks better to make that easier. But I think it's still work to get to that one scorecard, that one set of metrics. And I do think it's an interesting idea of, could you have one ops team across sales and marketing to make sure that happens?
So some of the best practices I'm hearing, and again, so for the listeners, I want them to kind of pick these like really good tactics. So one, Godard, you just mentioned a single scorecard for the entire organization, not these siloed scorecards. And then teams, ideally not teams, but a centralized ops leader that, and this is, something Sangram talks about, a centralized ops leader that actually represents the entire customer lifecycle, not segments of that. And Kris, I think what you shared is like, make sure these teams are using technologies that tie it all together, like Sendoso, like Demandbase, versus, I think 5 years ago, we saw technologies for departments. And what it sounds like you're recommending, and Gabe, you frankly said the same thing, find technologies that support the entire customer lifecycle. And then, Gabe, you brought up the problem. And I think it is maybe the incumbent problem in our current situation. What are some tactics that you'd recommend? And maybe we start with Godard this time, and then we'll move around. But what are some tactics you're seeing from your team? And you have this unique perspective that you actually see a little bit of a bird's eye view of marketing approaches that seem to be trending and more effective. And I don't know if you have it, but I would love, even if you're seeing shifts in your quadrants where you're like, hey, this company or this group of companies were not as relevant. Now we're seeing a lot of relevance in these kind of technologies and these kind of approaches.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting, more the trend we're seeing on G2 is frankly, vendors trying to get into more categories, especially, for example, in like rev tech, because there's like the gongs that started in conversational intelligence. Now they're moving toward forecasting. And I think the Clarys are also now trying to get into sales engagement and outreach and sales loft, because reality is, I think the last 5 or 10 years, there's tons of innovation, tons of new categories, tons of startups. But a lot of these companies became unicorns, raised hundreds of millions, right? And now I think also to respond to the customer, because right now the customers in this tougher economy, they're trying to consolidate systems. And so I think that's one interesting trend we're seeing. I think more vendors entering more categories and trying to offer a suite.
Yep.
Because I think that's what a lot of buyers want right now. So I think that's certainly one interesting trend in the data. And I think and also G2, we like to say we try to drink our own champagne. You know, or people used to say eat your own dog food, but at least I like champagne.
I don't like dog food as much, so I'm with you.
Yeah, but the idea, and I think the other trend now, I think as we all have to get more efficient, right, is how do you really make sure in your marketing efforts you're targeting the right buyer at the right time with the right message. And we all see that. I think consumer marketing's gotten really good at this. Like I always make the example of Insta, where Insta somehow they always know, you know, somehow they know my daughter loves to ski. They know it's end of ski season right now, and there's clearance in her favorite brand and her favorite color, and I end up buying it on Insta. I think B2B, we're not quite there yet, but I think G2 also, we provide buyer intent data, so we can tell you who's shopping your category right now, which means you're reaching out at the right time. And then we also can help with the right message, which we think, you know, the best message is, hey, Dave, here's a peer. You know, like here's a peer entrepreneur that loves this app. And, and frankly, that's where we also have a good partnership with platforms like Demandbase, because Demandbase manages all that orchestration, right? We provide just the intent data and the content. But I do think that's what also our marketing teams are trying to do. And I think as I advise to every marketer, you really got to be efficient. So you just have to have the right, target the right buyer with the right message at the right time. And that's you know, really essential right now to get efficiency.
I love it. And by the way, you referenced something early on. And every sales and market, if you're not doing this, a little tactic is use G2 as a research platform. Before you talk to clients or prospects or customers, come in and find out like what people are saying about these companies. Like it's, again, this is kind of an unrelated thing, but it's this crazy resource that sales and marketers typically, I'm not seeing use enough. So just maybe an unabashed pitch for G2, but you're stupid if you're not using it. It's great content out there. Okay.
That part's totally free, Dave. So I agree.
I know. It drives me. When I see people not do stuff like this, like I'm just like, yeah, Kris, like what's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think some tactics, you know, that we're trying or doubling down on this year, maybe more than others. One is thought leadership and kind of meeting the moment. I think, you know, you got to keep your content relevant. You know, things that you wrote last year, the year before, the year before. It feels like every year there's something new that you need to like go out and talk to the market about. You know, this year it feels more than ever talking about how important your customers are and expanding those customer relationships. And so how do we adapt the playbooks for people using Sendoso to adapt to those, you know, really in-moment trends, or, you know, adapting to the CFO being like the ultimate, you know, buyer now at some cases in terms of having more control than ever before. And how do you educate your champion that how to talk to their CFO? Because, you know, previously a champion might be able to just sign off on their own. So I think that's an area for us. The buying experience too, you know, we quarter before last rolled out a new kind of freemium PLG approach and testing that motion out from what was for the first 5 years of life a pure sales-led motion, and really going to test out the buying experience for, you know, a freemium onboarding type of strategy. So I think that's been important. And then I think it's just all hands on deck to drive revenue and retention. So what I mean by that is doubling down on partner co-selling, on exec sponsor co-selling, and really, or co-renewing, co-successing, and making sure you're using all of your resources.
That's super helpful. And that's, you know, kind of brings me to Gabe. And you mentioned this, like the buying process, and you guys are all saying the same thing. The buying process is not the same. It's not an individual. And I would say I think, if you guys disagree, I'd like you guys to challenge me. I think with the economy and where we're at in kind of our economic situation, it's getting more complex. It's not getting simpler. The buying committee is increasing in size. The approvals are more complex. You know, Gabe, what are some of the tactics that your team are using? And I love you in preparation for the roundtable, we all talked a little bit about this, but what are some of the things that are changing right now in the way you guys are kind of thinking about a go-to-market?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're also, like you said, kind of in the catbird seat in that, like, what we do is sales and marketing alignment. I mean, that's essentially the, ABM's mission is to align around the account so that marketing and sales are most effectively driving revenue. So, for better or worse, we see best in class implementations and we see a lot of struggle, right?
So what does best in class look like? I mean, and worse in class, actually.
Yeah, well, I guess worse in class will be the inverse, but like, I think you can think of best in class, kind of around 3 dimensions. Like the foundation is data.
Yeah.
And that's, if you don't have that, it's kind of like, it's your diet, it's the, whatever analogy you want to use, your house falls down, to mix metaphors, like, AI is not going to be good, right? Like, so there's so many data issues still, and data is a combination of third-party data sources like Demandbase's intent and G2's great intent, and also first-party collection. And so because of everything we're talking about around the digital go-to-market, and another trend that I think we underemphasize is the increase in the pace of change. So every account that you're selling into is changing more rapidly than it ever has. That can mean people resigning, that can mean people being laid off, that can mean new executives, that can mean budget cuts. And so that sales kind of idea that I'm going to build a relationship, and that's going to continue is just dead, right?
It's not relevant anymore.
Yeah, so you have constantly got to be understanding who your customers are, who your prospects are. If you don't have that data foundation across first and third party data, you can't do it. So, I mean, I think, that's the foundation of investing in the good data sources and good internal practices. I think the next is how intelligently, that you segment and you understand your customer journey, right? Because the personalization the right message, right time can't happen unless you understand who the customers are, potential customers, and where they are in a journey. So we have this concept in our platform called journey state, where you understand what happens within an account, how many people are engaging, what content pages are they seeing, what has marketing done, what has sales done. And that starts to define some process and understanding of what content should be delivered at different times. So the best in class definitely has a really tight an alignment and understanding around segmentation and customer journey. And then the last dynamic, I think, is the activation, right? Are you orchestrating and automating actions, through things like Sendoso effectively? Are you using, we have a powerful DSP that we built, an ad platform. Are you using a strong ad platform that efficiently, with doing more with less, actually gets accounts to your site? Are you activating through outreach at the right time, through Marketo at the right time? So I think best in class aligns the people and processes around the data, the segmentation, understanding of the customer, and the activation channels.
So I love, there's a trend in what I heard, like one, timing. Like timing is like a super critical thing. Godard, I think you mentioned it, but like I've received a Sendoso gift, and there was a time when I was like, oh, it's a cool gift, and I was like, I'm going to set this on my shelf and do nothing with it. And at a different time, a different company sent it to me when I was like, and I knew it was a Sendoso gift. I was like, I know where this came from, but it worked. And I was like, you know what? It's on point right now. And so I think these orchestrations with the right message at the right time can be super powerful. And again, I love your concept of segmentation, because like you cannot treat everybody the same way. Our needs are different. Our expectations are different. So that, and then again, your point of data, for everyone listening, if you are not analyzing your data, you're in some serious trouble. If you are not running your marketing, your sales, your customer success from a very, I'd say, data-oriented approach, you're in some serious trouble. And you might just start looking for your job, because you're not going to be around in your current job, whether you're a CEO right now, all the way down to a content writer. Like data is super critical. let's talk a little bit more around, and I've got, as you see me looking down, I've got some notes that we've talked about here just a bit. Talk about activation a little bit more, Gabe, and then I want to get the other folks some opinions on this. But what's working right now in terms of kind of activation techniques and modes right now?
Well, I think here is where you're intersecting with AI.
Okay.
Right? And like kind of I would guess both generative and non-generative AI. I mean, I think and also doing more with less. Okay. Right? Because if you go back to what we were talking about in terms of, segmentation and how important it is to understand even just the difference between enterprise and mid-market, right? Or different industries, different geos, like what is needed for each one of these accounts is completely different, right? And so to the degree to which you can automate that activation and not have to make decisions in real time or have people in real time working over long periods where you're actually missing out and coming in later in the sales cycle, it's a win-win-win. You're going to be more effective and you're going to do it for less. So I think this idea of utilizing predictive algorithms, utilizing intent, like we talked about, G2, Demandbase, and all these data sources to understand where your customers are and to be able to orchestrate actions. And that does take some planning because you have to map out what your customer journey is. You have to map out what is the right content to deliver at each stage. And you have to map out the systems that they go through. But it also goes back to my comment on strategy. Like it's not a tactic to deliver the right content through the right channel at the right time or to use AI. It all works together. It all works through segmentation, orchestration, understanding your customer journey, having the right data sources, and having the right channels.
You have to be a much smarter, more strategic marketer and salesperson and leader than we've ever been. And you talk about data, Godard. Like what I want to make sure everyone heard. G2 has intent data, and this is good intent data. It's not all intent data is created equal, and this is data. Well, tell us. Actually, I'll pitch it, but because I use it, but you'll pitch it better. Like, what is that data, and then how are you seeing? What are the tactics people are using around your platform to be super effective?
Yeah, and we think our intent data is more middle and bottom of funnel. There's obviously other sources like Bombora that are more top of funnel. That might be like, hey, this company's interested generally in cloud and security.
Yeah.
And that can be also good for targeting, but we think, on G2, they're actually then searching for specific, in a specific category. Like they might be, searching for account-based analytics, right? And then you can also see, hey, they're looking at Demandbase, they're looking at 3 competitive vendors, and you can see exactly what that company is doing, what products they're engaging with, what categories they're engaging with, and you get all that data via API in real time, and then you can score it. Mm-hmm. And I think most ABM, most marketing platforms, they have some scoring tools. But then you feed our data, which is, I think, the best at bottom and middle of funnel for software, into that. And then you can really score it better. And then I think the key to figure out is also your processes. At some score, maybe you want to go straight to the AE via Salesforce Chatter or Slack. Other stages, it's more the account at the, still account-based marketing stage. You want to do some messaging on LinkedIn, heat that account up further and score it more and more. But I do think, and you said it, Dave, I think you have to be good with data now. And I do also think if you want to be efficient in marketing, you have to use intent data, but it's a complex thing to do right, and I think that's where you do need, a platform like Demandbase and dial it in properly. And then also, obviously, you can tie in tools like Sendoso, right? Because hey, this customer is so hot, and Dave loves cars. I think you love cars.
I like cars.
What your favorite gift is, right? But then with AI, you can say, hey, what's the best? Someone that loves cars and is in the market right now for this tool. What's the best gift to send them? And I do think it's possible now with data, but it's also super hard, right? And we have these problems in our company. Everyone has like bad data in Salesforce, bad data in marketing, and all this stuff fails if your data is bad. And so I think that's the challenge, right? You have to have the best data, and you have to clean it, so then all the orchestration works.
So again, kind of like what Gabe said, a lot of prep work, more prep work than ever versus just go out and just go do stuff. And Kris, you said something that I loved, and it's around thought leadership, where we've got to, we have to stand out. We have to create value for our customers. And what's interesting, kind of full circle, GPT is not like you're not going to get thought leadership out of GPT content, like almost by definition. You have to do the work. So that's one thing I want maybe everybody who's listening to really, again, if you guys disagree with me, like call me out here, but people have to hear this. There are not shortcuts. There are tools in GPT and AI, but there's not shortcuts. You have got to do the work. I think that's what you're hearing from everybody here. You have like, use it as an asset, use it as a tool, but do not use it as a crutch. Don't use this for your thought leadership. Don't use this for your strategy. Like you've got to be different. One question though for you, actually, and elaborate on this, Kris, but in kind of this like what are the right activation tactics? But when is it right to actually reach out with, because using a gift or some way that, using your platform is a much more expensive activation technique than an email or something like that. When is the right time generally? And then, how do I know if I'm planning, like, how do I think about this?
Yeah, I think there is a bit of a misconception when you just look at the absolute cost of things. So like, sure, sending a $50 gift is $50 and sending one email is, close to free. But what if you had to spend 2 months sending free emails to get someone to attention, or you spent, 2 days with a gift? So I think there's some behind the scenes math and opportunity cost and tracking by channel conversion metrics. $1 in for an ad generates X dollars for this. So you really have to do, again, data. And on the back end, even though gifting can be perceived as a more expensive channel, if it drives superior results, then,
it's irrelevant.
Yeah, it's irrelevant. So, but to that point, I think there's different things that you could send if someone's showing intent data, or if they're, you're running a, maybe a meeting maker program and you're trying to have, the ABM team drive people to an event, or, an SDR's trying to catch someone's attention, or a CSM's welcoming a new customer. I think there's, depending on the situation, again, what's the right gift? And I think it's not necessarily a silver bullet, but you have to, in this day and age in B2B sales and marketing and CX, you have to do everything. You have to be doing all the different channels all the time, using all the different data at your disposal, because, if you're not doing it, probably your competitors are. And so it's all about how do you master kind of all the different channels, in my opinion.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so we're about out of time. What I'd love is just one from the three of you, like something that's like on your mind that you've been thinking about lately that you could share with the audience, the people attending, like, because, you get worried, you ruminate on these things that's occupying you. Let's start with Gabe. Like, what are you thinking about lately that would be useful for people to hear?
Well, I mean, I just think it's a better time than ever to dream big, as entrepreneurs and CEO. Like, I mean, I can't believe how fast things are changing. And, as a business, you have to take advantage of that. But also, as individuals, and we've talked about the skills needed are different. It's just such an opportunity. And we feel like at Demandbase, it's we're just scratching the surface. Our concept is, which aligns, I think, with everything here, is we ultimately want to build a self-driving go-to-market for B2B. And we really visualize it like that we're really at the beginning of our journey. And so I think even though we're going through very difficult economic times, we should, take the time to realize we're on the cusp of something really amazing, for great companies and for people that are investing in their career.
I love it. Basically, what I'm hearing is challenges create opportunity. So for people who are opportunistic and can be proactive, this is a career-making moment in their lives. It's super inspiring. I get the chills when I hear you say it. So I love that stuff. Kris, what's ruminating? What do you think?
Yeah. For me, I think for a while, SaaS and B2B felt like a rinse and repeat, and there was playbooks from a decade ago that you could just kind of follow along to. And I think now more than ever, you kind of have to rethink things. And, similar to Gabe's point, now's the time to kind of reinvent processes, reinvent some of your motions, rethinking how you're doing things. And I think it's a topic to address from, top down, and making sure that you can inspire your team to rethink whether it's how to leverage AI into products, or how do you have the revenue enablement team think about new techniques and tactics that we talked about today. But I think it's all about getting out of your comfort zone and trying new things.
Yeah, I love it. And that's kind of what we're hearing is like, you have to be strategic here. You have to be thoughtful. And using your old plays or someone else's old plays is the opposite of that. And using GPT to try and figure out your plays, that's literally the opposite of that. It's using everybody else's in average. That's amazing. Thank you. Godard, what are you cooking on lately? Like what's been bugging you, or what are you thinking about that would be useful for people?
Yeah. Well, one thing, and I do a bit of angel investing. I think one thing I tell entrepreneurs now is like, assume you'll never raise money again.
Yeah.
And make sure you can make it, which creates a constraint around efficiency. And then I think the second exciting thing I've been in tech now since the 90s. And I remember when the Netscape graphical browser first was launched. And I do think generative AI is as big an opportunity. And I think the two can come together well, because we can use the AI to get efficient and to make it without more funding. And so I think that's the challenge. Very constrained funding. The opportunity, I do think AI is probably the biggest breakthrough opportunity in tech in the last 30 years.
Yeah.
So use it.
Use it. So look, what you're hearing today is you may feel down, you may feel overwhelmed. I think expectations from your leaders are probably the highest they've probably been since you've been in your current roles out there. But the opportunities are the biggest you'll probably ever have in your career, which makes sense. As we know, you said this, Godard, like with constraints comes innovation. There's a time to innovate what you do. And that's what you just talked about, Kris. Like, you have to be thoughtful. You have to be strategic. Guys, honestly, one of the best conversations I've had as far as I can remember. Like, really pretty inspiring stuff, you guys. I think there's a lot of good nuggets for everybody to go out and be better. And if nothing more, just be inspired. Again, people watching, if you don't know these technologies, these companies, go check it out. Like Sendoso, I've used it, I've consumed it, and I've bought from it. Demandbase, similarly, used it, consumed it. It is such a game-changing technology. And then obviously G2, like, guys, there's so much opportunity that you can gain from what these men have built. So please invest in and check it out and enjoy the rest of the day. Like, there's a lot of amazing content. Everything's ungated. Everything's open to everybody. And then one last thing, if people want to reach out to you, and I'll just start with Gabe, how should they best reach out to you?
Well, I guess email is best. So it's a first initial last name at demandbase.com.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. Kris, how should they reach out to you?
Yeah. Find me on LinkedIn, add me on LinkedIn, email me, Kris@sendoso.com, or send me a gift.
I like that.
That would probably work for you, Kris.
Godard, what about you? How should people reach out if there's something that's burning and they really want to connect?
Godard@g2.com.
Okay. Honestly, guys, I cannot thank you enough. It has been super inspiring, super educational, really helpful. So thank you again.
All right.
My pleasure.
Have a good day.
Thanks.